I get this, right? Why doesn't everybody, I'm screaming it from the rooftops, but I didn't understand a couple of things. I didn't understand that they needed to trust themselves. They needed to trust the message of healing, and they needed to believe that they could do it. All those three things need to align, this trifecta. And so for a lot of people, they may be trusting that healing's happening. It can happen. They believe what we're saying is true, but maybe they're not even believing themselves because they're still trying to rely on their own strength. And the really key moment is saying, I put my weapons of war down and I'm just willing to flow with it.
That's very freeing to be able to do that. Yeah. And it sounds like it's easy. It's not, but and sometimes you have to keep putting that back down. Sometimes you go and pick it back up. You got to put it back down. Hello, and welcome back to Healing and Growing Hand in Hand podcast. I'm your host, Lisa Tickle, and our guest today is Denise Lee. And let me tell you a little bit about her. She is a life coach, and she specializes in trauma and addiction. So she has a good understanding of it, it sounds like. And she's also a sexual abuse and child incest survivor as well, which there's a lot right there. And the topic we're going to talk about today is understanding trauma and its impact on behavior and relationships. And like we were talking before I started the recording, that's a lot right there. There's so much in that. And the one thing that I didn't say this to you before we started the recording, but the one thing that aside from all everything you put into your application when you submitted it, the one thing that kind of stood out to me is you wrote, I can help your listeners gain actionable strategies to shorten their suffering and empower their healing journey. And I love that because that's exactly what I say all the time in my podcast is I want this podcast to be able to go out and shorten people's suffering. They get an aha moment or whatever it takes to get them to go onto their healing journey or deeper into their healing journey. So I had to say that. I love that. That makes us very like-minded right there. So Denise, why don't you tell us a little about yourself and then we can get into the topic.
Ooh, well, that was a heck of an introduction, Lisa. I'm just like exhaling, like,
yeah.
So it's really hard to like summarize myself because in a lot of ways, I think we're all little patchwork and the tapestry internet connected with not just our connection with other people, but our memories and like the ideas that we have formed as a result of them. But for me, I always have like two ways of introducing myself. Hi, I am an entrepreneur, I'm a life coach. And the other side, hi, I'm an entrepreneur that was burnt out because she didn't deal with decades of unhealed trauma and wounds. And I became an entrepreneur because I didn't know how to relate to other people in the real world.
Wow, that sounds like me too.
So I really want everybody who's listening to understand that I'm not coming from a thou out greatest, figured it out, mountaintop experience. I'm just trudging along the road towards happiness like everybody else.
Yep. Yeah, that's me too. And I love that. And and what I love about so many of my guests, and it sounds like you're in that place too, is that you've done a lot of healing and you've found modalities and methods that work for you that you share with others and that you want to be able to kind of pay it forward and help others as well.
That's the goal. It's funny because in the beginning of my journey, Lisa, I think like for everybody, they're like, we minimized it.
Yeah.
We suppressed it. We downplayed it. We dealt with people who enabled us to do further destructive things. And so the healing journey got stunted in the beginning because I was making friends with people who were more invested in the victim Denise than the victorious Victor Denise.
Me too. Definitely. Yeah. You surround yourself with people that, keep you comfortable.
Yeah.
Although I call it comfortably uncomfortable because it's not really a comfortable place. It's not a good place to be.
It's never a good place. It's so funny. Everybody heals different ways for sure. I know we're probably going to get into all of that later. But for me, I'm a nerd. I really needed to understand not just the science, but not just the psychology, but the science of it. And
Mm-hmm.
I found out about this. We have tons of different nerves and brain cells and all this stuff, but I heard about this particular thing called mirror neurons. And this is exactly what it is. It's a mirror that replicates exactly what monkey see, what we do. Monkey see, monkey do. And so if we have been habitualized towards certain types of behavior, it's normalized. And in order to feel steady physically, mentally, like we need to replicate the patterns and the habits that
Yes.
we did when we were kids or when we
Yes.
were in a situation of abuse. And so I'm like, it was a big aha moment, Lisa. I was
Mm-hmm.
like, oh, wow. That's why I found myself still drinking, even though I knew it was killing me. That's why I started yelling, even when I
Right.
knew things like I didn't understand that.
It makes so much sense when you learn about something like that. Because as you were saying that, I zipped through my life and I could see, oh, that makes complete sense why I did that. It makes complete sense why I got into the marriage that I did and the relationships that I did. It makes complete sense. At the time, it didn't, but looking back on it now, it makes complete sense. And so it's so empowering to discover that. And I know for me, it kind of separated who I was from that behavior. It kind of gave me that distance and was no longer my identity.
Mm. Mm. It's funny you say that, Lisa, because I think about that. And I know a lot of people talk about in the recovery circles, like that was how my adaptation response. That was separate from my identity. But you know what? Now I'm thinking about it. I would say that was part of the me that didn't understand my value.
Correct. Correct.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I don't know. I just know my experience. And I know when I think
Yeah.
back, because I literally, when I'm doing these podcasts and I'm doing all this stuff, I literally take myself back to that moment or that time, and I can kind of
Yeah.
relive the thoughts and the memories of it. And I just find it to be true for me that I absolutely made everything I did my identity, which made me a
Yeah.
really bad person. It made me really unlovable, and so it just was this really vicious cycle that I got myself into. And so for me, learning about that, and the more I learn about it, and the more I
Mm.
can I am able to separate that and go, okay, I did that behavior because of the trauma. That makes sense. So that means it's not me. And then you find out other people behave that way too. And all of a sudden it's like, okay, so it's not just me. And it just opens up that opportunity. It opened up the opportunity for me to be more curious and delve into my healing more.
Mm. That's so true because, when I think about Lisa, like when I'm talking to a client, and there's no way I can just have this detached clinical standpoint and like, oh, here's the pathologies, here's your mouth. I literally remember the version of me eating candy to fall asleep. I think about the me having sex with strangers in weird places. I think about me
Hmm.
in those
Hmm.
situations because I think for a lot of us who are in that healing journey, there's so much shame because we don't feel like we can identify with people who get what we went through.
Exactly. People who haven't experienced it don't get it. And the things that we do in survival mode are things we would never do outside of survival mode. And there is a lot of shame in that. Hmm.
There is a lot of people, especially in this culture of instant gratification, uh, add to cart now, like this hurry thing that feels that we should have that hurried energy.
Yes.
And that's why we don't feel like we even are worthy of forming these deep connections where we can
Yep.
feel safe and vulnerable to share it.
Yep.
I mean, I think about this is 2024. I didn't even know in the last 20 years has been an explosion of like platforms like yours, Lisa, and everywhere. Like people are like more open and sharing
Hmm.
it. And I know even people say, well, as a result of the pandemic, even more discussions about, big T's, little T's, or traumas. When I
Yeah.
say big T's and little T's, I'm talking about, for those who don't know what I'm talking about, the little stressful things that reoccur and the big T traumatic things,
Hmm.
car explosions, all rape, just stuff like horrific
Hmm.
things that happen, a flash bang moment. But what I'm trying to say is that for a lot of people, that the pandemic really awaken people like, oh my goodness, I've been living on numbed autopilot. And the fact that
Yeah.
I'm trapped inside of my house
With
is forcing me
myself.
to confront with myself
Yeah.
instead of like hurriedly busy from one thing to another. I know now we're probably gearing back into it again, but that's neither
Right.
here nor there.
But it did open a lot of people's eyes because that's and I'll tell you, when I was in survival mode, that's one thing that I did. And I know for me it was a way of escaping, of if I just keep, well, first of all, I had to keep myself busy. I had to work because my then husband did not. But it
Mm.
also kept me from having to sit with myself.
Isn't it funny, Lisa, how we find people that just bring out the worst of us?
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Like a moth to a flame.
Totally, totally. And that's what it was for sure in my first marriage. And I'm not throwing him under the bus at all because I was a hot mess too. And I know of his pain, and we
Mm.
weren't good together. We weren't good. We loved each other, but we just weren't good together. And I also outgrew him, and I wanted things different. I had to do things different. I was sick of it. It wasn't just him, it was
You,
me.
well, it's funny you say that when you're like, we were no good for each other. I was literally thinking about the Dr. Patrick Carnes. He pioneer of modern sex addiction. He wrote an interesting book, Lisa, called Betrayal Bonds. And they said,
Oh,
we always say these people were no good, but in fact, they were good for us. They reminded us of all the feelings that were comfortable and familiar to us and to lead to this inevitable destructive power.
yeah. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's true. It's true. Yeah. So
Yeah.
so let's talk about understanding more about the trauma, like what you wanted to talk about and the impacts on, we're talking about the behavior, and we're kind of talking a little bit more about relationships.
Yeah.
But let's touch a little bit more first on behaviors because
Mm.
I think I told you before I don't know if it was before we started the recording, but I rewrote the women's workshop that I'm doing. And one of the things
Mhm.
that I found to be important, I did the same thing with the workshop that I'm doing with the podcast. And that is I kind of go back in 25, 30 years ago and think, what did I need? What did I need at that moment to help
Mm.
me get on my healing journey? And I go back
Mhm.
to what we were mentioning a little earlier is about our behaviors. And I want to
Yeah.
emphasize this a little bit because it is a big deal. It was a big deal for me. And I think it's a big deal for a lot of people. And it really creates the shame in us, which shuts down our voice. And, and in the workshop, I'm bringing up, and this is kind of crazy, all the behaviors that happen with a certain topic.
Yeah.
For instance, with shame, or
Mhm.
with I'm trying to think real quick off the top of my head. um, Shame, and there's anyway, I can't think of any right now, but I'm listing out all the behaviors that happen within that topic that are
Yeah.
are bad behaviors.
Mhm.
In all the subjects that I picked, I had almost every single behavior,
Mm.
and I
Yeah.
cannot tell you what that did to my mind when I used before I realized that it was from the trauma. Because here's what would happen: I would probably get triggered. A behavior
Mm.
would come out that comes from that trigger that's not healthy. Because when I'm triggered, I'm going back and I'm reliving that moment. So I'm doing the behavior
Mm.
that happened back then that worked then.
Mm.
The person that's standing across from me has no idea what's going on within me, but they see
Mm.
this, what I related to as crazy behavior. It's not crazy behavior, but it's triggered behavior. But to them, it's over the top. The behavior is over the top compared to what the situation is. And then that person's looking at me like, what's going on? Which then spirals me out,
Mm.
which then takes me to a place of, when it finally settles down, and it never settled down well, not for me, then I would spend how many days beating myself up over that behavior. Does that sound familiar?
No. Yeah.
Hope I didn't trigger anybody, but that's literally, and that is so hard, especially when you don't understand that behavior you just did, you were just triggered. When you don't understand that, when you understand it, when you learn about it, then you're empowered and you can manage it, right?
Yeah. So there's a lot of things that, first of all, thank you for contributing to this healing community by providing resources for people who are just at that point where they realize that what they're doing is going to kill me, and I actually want to stay alive. I'm not.
Yeah,
It's not
that's
for
true.
people who actually or who are want to have their abuser kill them. And I don't mean this flippantly when I say this, because if I had to be honest with you, I didn't want to do the dirty work of trying to kill myself. So I got
Yeah.
myself into dangerous situations so they could do the dirty work for me.
There you go. I think that's
Yeah.
probably common. I mean, you think about it when people get into addictions, like you're
Yeah.
talking about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So when you're talking about the behavior, I want to say that for a lot of us, I mean, everybody hears about the flight fight syndrome, right? Like
Yeah.
the response, the flight versus the sympathetic nervous system response when we either see something and we want to either fight it or flee it. But there's a lot of other things that we could do, right? We could fawn. These are the people who give you empty, meaningless flattery just so they get out your face. These are the people who would make passive aggressive comments. Oh yeah, sure, I'll be there at 5 p.m. 5:30 rolls up and they're still not there. Those are the people that literally get overwhelmed and either have sometimes asthma attacks,
Yeah.
right? These are the people that, get weathered easily,
Mhm.
right? Like
Mhm.
our body responds in all sorts of weird ways
Mhm.
beyond just fighting, running away
Yeah.
from stress.
Yeah.
And so everybody's situation is different. And I wouldn't sit here and like everybody who's gone through a traumatic event has to go through this path. I'm like,
Right.
no,
Right.
no.
And you mentioned that example, and I used to do that. I would look at you, you'd invite me to something, and at the time I'm like, "Oh, yeah, I like that. Yeah, I'd love to come." And I mean it when I say it. But then
Hmm.
as we get closer to the actual event, the anxiety would rise up in me, and I would end up finding a way to get out of it, and I always felt so horrible. And I didn't realize at the time that it's probably my anxiety.
Yeah. It was a stress response. It's like
Yeah.
I mean, like during those moments, everybody talks about cortisol, right? But
Yeah.
there's more than cortisol. There's the thing called norepinephrine. There's adrenaline. Okay. There are other hormones that tell our body to literally shut down or shut up.
Yeah. Yep.
And if your body has been fueled with that for years, if not decades, like I was thinking about one particular
Yeah.
client I had, and this was back in the days I did more medical exercise, personal training, and she had rheumatoid arthritis. She had some other type of mobility issues. And when I looked at her and I was talking with her, her mind was going 5,000 miles an hour. She was very anxious and scared. And I was like, oh my goodness, her body's going through a full on inflammation effect because she has all this unprocessed trauma. And I didn't
Mm.
know it at the time. I just knew it was chronic, widespread inflammation, but I didn't know it was because of release of all those hormones coming out.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah,
we know that stored trauma can cause autoimmune diseases.
for sure.
Yeah. And
For
rheumatoid
sure.
arthritis is one of them.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many books that talk about the inflammatory response, and when the body says no by Dr. Gabor Mate,
Mm-hmm.
uh, uh, Bessel van der Kolk, I forgot,
Yes.
The Body Keeps Score. I mean,
Yes.
there's the Second Brain by Dr. Michael Gershon. Like, there's books out there because, like, people say, "Oh no, it's not in my body." I'm like, "Baby, it is in your body. It's screaming. It's
Mm-hmm.
oozing out."
Right. Right. And they say the difference between a trigger and a memory is you're just remembering. A trigger, you're reliving it. You're
Mm,
actually reliving it. And that's why your body responds the way it does, is because your brain is saying, oh, we're going back and we're reliving that moment.
exactly.
And so let's gear up for it. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. It's very fascinating because I mean, there was a study, Lisa. It was a big study, the Adverse Childhood Experiences, the ACE. I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
you recall in the '90s, Kaiser Permanente and the CDC. They had a list of 10 questions, and they were all these like, what happened to you as a kid? Were you feeling safe? Were you able to communicate? It was there like consistency with your mom and dad? And every single one, like depending on how many yeses, like I were unsafe, was leading up to people who were more inclined to cardiovascular problems,
Yes.
inflammation, like all sorts of stuff. So we
Yeah.
know it's documented.
Right. I was a 7 on that test. And then,
Oh.
yeah, I was a 7 on that test. And do you know who Tim Fletcher is? He was a guest on he is a complex trauma expert. He's
Mm,
amazing. And he took that
mm,
test and he expanded it to, I believe, 60 questions because it was things like, because that's a really great test, but it didn't cover things. His goes into more detail. Like, I guess if a child experienced, being in a war or something like that, that wasn't on that ACE test, it goes into more details. Really,
mm,
really interesting. But yeah, I was a 7 out of 10 on that test.
mm. It's fascinating because we know, and pardon me, I know it's probably lowball. Like the common consensus, if you Google it up, they'll say, "Oh, like 70% of us have experienced some form of trauma in our life." Like 70, I say 100%
Yeah,
of
I
us
think
at
everybody
one
has.
point of our life.
Mm-hmm.
And so, for a lot of us, we think if it has to be like exposure to some drug laden crime situation, right? Like if we're in the inner city or the project or somewhere in a third world
Yeah.
country or dystopia.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
that's not what that looks like. It could look like somebody in their home and the bill collectors call every night.
Yes, or there's a child in the family that is very ill, or a family member that's very ill. That changes the whole dynamic of that family. And that's trauma. I mean, that's not something that can be helped, right? But it still has a great effect.
I mean, see, this is where I feel really stuck when I talk with people, and this is after I tell them I'm an incest survivor and a rape survivor and I all yada yada, all the horrible things. And I say, you know what? I learned a lot. And people say, well, that's awesome for you, but I'm feeling stuck. And I say there
Yeah,
has to come a point where you have to ask yourself how you want to identify yourself in the next 5, 10, 15 years.
that's a
And then
good.
but if you're a trauma survivor, all you can think of is the past or the present pain. And so that healing journey is asking yourself, can I look a little forward to a version of
Yes.
you that amazes you?
Yes.
That
Yes.
amazes you.
Yes. Absolutely. That has been hugely profound in my life. I mean, I'm not saying that right, but that has been something that I've actually done. Is I, you get locked into, and here's an example. This is what made me kind of realize it. I was driving to work one day and there's this transition. I'm in San Diego, so traffic is horrible. And so there's the transition in the morning between one freeway to another. And it's just you've got to look everywhere. It's just crazy the way people do this transition. And
Mm,
as I was making the transition, you got to look on both sides, you got to look in front, you got to look behind. And it's just kind
mm,
of, it's not fun to try to do. And so what hit me though as I was coming over is, if I just paid attention to what was in my rearview mirror, if that's the only thing that
mm,
I looked at, imagine how many cars I would just crash into. Right. And
mm.
there's some like it hit me like all at once. And then it just made me realize that in my life, I can't stare at that rearview mirror. I can't focus on that rearview mirror. I need to focus what's in front of me in the big, window. And there's going to be times that I'll need to look at my rearview mirror, but I need to stop focusing on that because I'm going to crash and burn. I'm going to crash and burn.
I love that analogy. And for you guys who are listening or watching or whatever however you're consuming the information, as Lisa was talking and I looked at her eyes, I could just see like her your pupils dilate a bit as you were recalling that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's this ability of, can I stay calm in the middle of the storm? You
Yeah.
know, retrain your body to understand you are safe, you're well, you're protected.
Yes.
And I mean, I just threw out a tool just right now. I just inadvertently did that. That's not really what I wanted to talk about, but I mean, that's something literally that you have to do is train, like literally say
Yes.
it out loud, make those
Hmm.
declarations as part of the recovery journey. But for a lot of us, right, if we knew to feel safe, it was always constantly replaying events. Okay, I know that dad gets crazy unless he has 2 beers. okay, I know if I make sure if I enter in the back, not the front at certain time frames, I know if I never mention certain things, I'll be
Yeah.
okay. And then so we're constantly replaying, remixing
Yeah.
all those scenarios again. And we don't realize that all that constant replay, right? It's just like a record. It's tiring the record. It's tiring your mind.
Yeah.
And that's why I talk to so many trauma survivors, and that's like, Denise, I am tired. I'm like, baby, I
Yeah.
know you're tired. Your head has been spinning through
Yeah.
tons of stuff all day long.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah. Oh yeah. I remember being exhausted all the time. And, up until I was 24, I smoked cigarettes.
Yeah.
And so, I quit smoking. I thought, oh, that'll take care of it. I'm sure that's probably why I'm tired. It didn't make any difference. Why am I so tired all the time? Well, I was in survival mode. And then if I wasn't in survival mode, I had a victim mindset. So I was constantly on hypervigilant alert. And like you were just saying, that assess everything. And you get to that point where you walk into a room and you're assessing it before you walk in. And you're assessing it as you walk in, and you're assessing it the whole time you're in the room. And that's exhausting when your brain has to work that hard all the time, and your adrenal gland and your body's just on alert, just waiting for your brain to find something for you to either fight or fly or whatever. It's exhausting.
You know, I think a lot of people, and I can identify with me. And if you can't, that's fine. Fill in the blanks with something else that applies to you. But for me, I also consumed a lot of content that kept
Mm.
my body in high stress all the time. And
Oh
one of the
yeah.
things that I used to do was I loved watching murder mystery stuff,
Ooh,
right?
yeah.
And I loved watching soap operas,
Mm.
specifically The Young and the Restless. And I go back to that book, Betrayal Bonds by Dr. Patrick Carnes. I'm not trying to advertise his book, but I think about he specifically mentions that he says, for a lot of us, we're tuned to high stress, high dramatic situations because
Mm-hmm.
it reactivates all the same familiar sensations that we had become accustomed to as a child. And it's so funny, Lisa, like the other day out of curiosity, I was on my home, I was in bed, I was looking at my phone, and I was like, oh, is this, is Young and Restless, still in business, longest running soap opera in US history. Yeah, it's sort of Bold and Beautiful. Tells you how many years I was watching that. Anywho, I'm sitting there, Lisa, and I'm watching these 1 minute clips, right? And my heart is starting to
Mm.
racing. I'm starting to feel like it was just dialogue.
But your
It was
body went
just
back.
dialogue. Yes. And so for those of you guys who are listening, like one of the things that if you actionable items is check the content you're consuming because
Yes.
it may inadvertently trigger your body into stress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And
What?
people think it's entertainment. It's not entertainment. It's just you're like,
No, it's not. And it's the music. It's what you watch. It's what you read. It's all of that. I mean, there's times that like I just take a break from social media. Like I've had enough.
mm,
And I will
mm,
put my phone down, and I will take a break from it for days because I've had enough. Because I am sensitive to that as well, and I can, now that I live in a much calmer state, it's much more obvious to you, right? When, like you said, your life, you live a very different life now. You just happen to flip that on, and immediately your body responded. And you
yeah,
caught it right away because you've become very sensitive to that, and you've created a peaceful life for yourself. So when there's upheaval, it's really uncomfortable. And imagine this, we live like that all the time.
mm, mm.
We lived in that state.
It's so funny. I'm in this Bible study group for my mentor, and I could tell he's seriously stressed about the election because almost every single we read a Bible verse and then you can comment, and almost single time he's always mentioning the election, or like, he
Yeah.
doesn't mention names or anything like that. But I'm like, wow, like we're supposed to be like meditating on things that calm us and nurture our souls, and you're talking about
Ooh.
stress inducing. So can you imagine his state of mind?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, we do need to protect. We do need to protect this. We absolutely do. It's even to the point where our home is our sanctuary. And so we
Yeah.
are really careful, because I didn't live in a sanctuary, and I didn't create a sanctuary for years. I lived in chaos. I was part of that chaos and drama. And it's been over the last probably 10 plus years that I am so careful about my home, because not only is it for us, but it's for anybody who enters that home. I want them to feel comfortable and peaceful. I don't want them to feel the chaos. I know what that feels like. And so that's not invited into my home.
One of the things that I didn't notice until like recently, like I have a son, and my husband and I, we were talking to our son about, I don't know what it was, and he said, do you notice that there's never any music blasting in our house and it's quiet all the time? And I mean, I've been married for 12 years. Our son's 8. And I didn't even click and dawn
Wow.
on my mind that we were intentionally keeping our house quiet. We only have one TV in the house. We rarely play any music out loud. My son recently got a little sound machine and he only plays it when he wants a shower. But the house is intentionally quiet. And it contrasts the way I grew up, where
Mhm.
music was blasting all the time. Boom, boom,
Yeah.
boom, bass,
TV
bass,
was
shaking
on.
the wall.
Mhm.
Yeah. And I didn't realize, like, wow. And I think about why, Lisa, sometimes I feel uneasy going to people's homes, especially if there's lots of things on the wall,
Yeah.
music, like my sensors are like sensory
Overload.
overload.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
so again, I guess another actionable tip is making sure that, to your point about making your home a sanctuary, like also removing sensory inputs that can overload you.
Yeah. I was sitting there thinking, we only have one TV in our house too. Yeah. And I refuse to put one in my bedroom. I refuse to. I am not the bedroom is not for watching TV. So we don't do that. But and it's interesting because I love music. Music, I can feel music. And there's music that can make me angry, and then there's music that can just energize me or calm me down. And so if we have anything on during the day, there's like little jazz music in the background. and
Yeah.
and it's the kind of music, it for some reason it just really energizes me. So if I'm in the kitchen working or something, it just really energizes me. But that's something that we learn to shut down when we have gone through our trauma, is our feel, how we feel, what we're feeling. And that is so
Hmm.
important to our healing and to keep and to maintain our health. Because you know like you were saying, you turned on that show and watched just a minute of it, and how it had this profound effect on you. I've talked about how there's music that my son listens to that I walk in the house, I'm like, turn that off. It just instantly angry, and there's music that brings me to tears when I'm in worship, so, pay attention to that. And you're right. And the thing that you need to pay attention to is, what was my life like when I was a kid?
Hmm.
Am I
Because
recreating
we're
that?
replicating it.
Right.
Yeah, a lot of us are replicating it, like inadvertently. And I was talking with a client the other day, and he was saying, "Oh, I've been doing my son's like baseball as a coach. I've been volunteering for that." And I wouldn't say little league, because little league is literally something different. But anyway, the local community softball.
Oh,
And
right.
he says, "Oh, I didn't growing up. I didn't do soccer. In fact, I never did this until I was an adult, because my dad always said that he's from Poland, and we don't do stuff like that. That's a lazy man's thing. You just get up, you swing a ball, you sit back down. You don't get around. You move. If you want to move, you do football, which is soccer, we call here
Right.
soccer." And as a result, he felt like in order for him to feel satisfaction from playing a sport, he had to do things that were literally butt busting activities.
Oh, well,
And
that kind,
so,
yeah.
yeah. So that's a sneaky one, because we think on the surface we're exercising, but we're always reaffirming the
Right.
victimization that we received.
Right. Yeah. And reinforcing that belief that we have. And the thing that you need to question is, where'd that belief come from?
Hmm.
See, he figured out where that belief came from. And then you can unwind it. Well, am I okay with that belief? Do I have to
Well,
believe
there's
that
those
now?
yeah, and like to your point about the feelings, right? So I feel if I don't overwork, I'm feeling shameful. I'm
Right.
feeling lazy. Like, no, you're not. You're just repeating the talking points you got from your daddy.
Exactly.
So some
Exactly.
of those feelings are just transferred beliefs
Correct.
from one generation to another. It's not necessarily even you.
That's true. That's true. And that's why being curious and questioning, what is this that's going on? And that's why I have said on my podcast over and over, it is so important that you have self-awareness, that you work on your self-awareness first, because that's what's going to help you figure all this out. It's the self-awareness that's going to make you stop and realize, okay, wait, I think I'm feeling something. And then be curious and investigate what that feeling is, and then what belief has come out of that, and then investigate that belief. Is that belief true? Is that my belief, or is that a belief I just believe because someone told me? And then if you need to, you deconstruct it and reconstruct it.
And I really love that, constructing, deconstructing if necessary. But for a lot of us, I need people to understand that they may feel afraid because they may have
Yeah.
been punished, right?
Yes.
From
Yes.
their perpetrator, their
Yes.
abuser. Don't, how dare you question me? And
Yes.
so for even as an adult, you may think, oh, I shouldn't question this. And like,
Mhm.
who told you you can't even question this?
Right. Exactly. Exactly. It's that little, that little child in you that's rising up going, wait, wait, wait. We're not supposed to question anything. We're not supposed to ask that. Nope. We're going to get in trouble, and
Mm.
we need to tell ourselves, no, it's okay. It's okay. I'm just curious. I'm just curious. I just need to know where this came from, because the one thing that Tim Fletcher said on my podcast, and there was a lot of really profound things that he shared, but this one was really profound to me. And that was, I asked him, okay, why is it us victims walk around with shame, and the person that was the abuser, there's no shame? And he said, shame is a set of beliefs you have about yourself. That's really all it is. And as soon as he said that, and he said it much more eloquently than I did. But as he said it, I scanned through my life and I realized he's right. Because in my life, the beliefs I had about myself were so horrible. And so the shame was just consuming me. As my beliefs about myself have changed, the shame has gone way down. And the shame only pops up here and there. And when it does, because of my self-awareness, I'm aware of it. And I'm like, wait, what's going on with that? Why do I feel shameful? And then I can dive a
Mm.
little deeper. But I thought that was really profound, because for me, I feel like shame and jealousy are just two emotions there's no good thing that come from it. There's no positive thing. And when he said that, I was like, that makes total sense in my life.
Mm. But I think there's a misconception, though, Lisa, that the victims of the abuse are the only ones that feel the shame.
Right. And I hope I didn't say that. No, but I just know that so many victims that I work with carry
Yeah.
shame.
Oh,
I
no, for
don't,
sure.
yeah, the abusers, I know that there's abusers that do. You're right.
Yeah. No. I guess I want, and that's the reason why I'm mentioning that is because some of the reason why, I hate to call ourselves like victims, right?
Right.
We're
Survivors.
survivors. We're
Survivors.
survivors. We're survivors. Because I think for a lot of us, we have to be careful with our words.
Correct.
So intentional about our words. I am a survivor. I'm a survivor. I am, when I say I label myself as abused, I'm dependent. I'm limited. I'm trapped. I'm scared, and
Mm.
all those words that come along the ride with it. But when I was thinking about what you said earlier about where in your conversation with Tim about this idea of the labels, right? When one of the most profound things that I discovered in my own healing journey was that my vocabulary, Lisa, was so limited. It was
Yes.
so limited. It
Yes.
was only about fear, worry, loathing, self like that,
Yeah.
or I went to the other extreme, hubris.
Mm.
Over emphasizing myself, bravado. It was polar extremes that was modeled
Yeah.
from my abusers, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I realize now part of my healing journey was adding more words to my emotional toolkit to
Yeah.
help me. I shouldn't say emotion, my feelings toolkit to explain, no, I'm not feeling shamed. I'm feeling preoccupied. I'm feeling concerned. I'm feeling aghast. Like, oh, no, I'm not feeling anxious. I'm feeling unprepared.
Mm-hmm.
Because so we're so used to labeling with certain words
Yeah,
because
that's
that
true.
was linked to our past, but there's actually way more words.
Mm-hmm.
I remember when I was in therapy, you remember the feelings wheel? They had that little cartoon stick figure thing, and they're like, point to where you're feeling
Yes.
today, right? And I thought it was such the lamest, most immature thing in the world but I'm realizing that children and survivors of abuse, we need that.
Yes.
We need that so bad.
Yeah, because our
And
vocabulary is very small. It's 3 or 4 words. You're right. Yeah.
and the other thing is we need to also understand where we're at, our temperature, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Most of us who have been survivors of traumatic, horrific, recurrent, stressful things have been acting as a thermometer rather than a thermostat. You know what I mean?
Oh, yeah. There's a big
And
difference between that.
yeah, where in order for us to set ourselves to where we're at, being intentional and mindful, we just ebbed and flowed to whatever the emotional pulse of the room was. And no wonder why we felt frazzled and scattered all the time, right? There's studies that have proven that reoccurring stressful things will shrink your prefrontal cortex of the executive reasoning part of your brain. And that can set you up for Alzheimer's, dementia, all sorts of other, cognitive functions. So it's proven scientifically that we are not being aware of how a stressor is impacting us is damaging our minds. But what I really wanted to say earlier, Lisa, is that the temperature. So I've been talking to a lot of child psychologists lately, not because my child's going through something, but they thought he had autism. I don't know. That's the whole different other subject.
Yeah.
But anyway, during that time, I learned about the color chart. And so this is what they use for child psychologists. And let me explain what it is. So imagine like the basic primary colors: red, yellow, green, right? Red
and blue.
Yellow, and blue. All right. So think about the basic colors, right? Red, yellow, green, blue. So for a lot of us who are mad, angry, irate, guess what color that is?
Red.
Red, right? What if you're feeling anxious and worried? You're yellow. Blue, what do you think blue is?
Calm.
Depressed.
Well, okay. All right. So, yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah. All right. And then green is you're good. You're calm. Good to go. And so for a lot of us who are survivors, we never identify what color we're at.
No. Interesting. Huh.
If you want to be able to be a survivor, it requires being a thermostat and knowing your color. Like, for example, I didn't get a lot of good sleep. Like, half my nostril got clogged up. I don't even know why, but I got this adjustable bed and everything. I don't know what the heck it is, Lisa. But the point of it is, I woke up feeling blue. And I knew because I was feeling blue, it was not safe for me to drive. It was not safe for me to be around certain people until I got well rested. And because in the past, if I didn't recognize and honor my color, instead of fighting it, I would try to plow through.
Yes.
Then I could easily go red or yellow and frazzled and just mess up a whole bunch of stuff and irritate people and myself. And so for a lot of us, we don't respect our color where we're at.
I love that. That is a great example. And it's true, because if you go out and you try and do stuff when you're not ready for it, there's a lot of cleanup. There's a lot of cleanup that you have to do. And I've said it in my podcast. I'm tired of cleanup. I tried to avoid the cleanup. I've done a lot over my life.
And I think, Lisa, like, everybody thinks for themselves that somehow if we survive, right, we're going to have this magic wand that goes over us and say, like, all of our mistakes, all of our errors, all of the, all that stuff, it should go away, right? We shouldn't be reminded of it. But you know what? I don't want to forget the fact that I made provocative overtures towards my supervisors. You shouldn't do that. I don't want
Mm-hmm.
to forget that I let a drunken man drive me 40 miles in a rainstorm back home after a concert.
Mm,
I don't want to forget that
yeah.
because it reminds me of how much work I needed to do to get to where I am now.
True, true. Yes, absolutely. That is so true. Yeah, I mean, our past made us who we are today. And, you I know I can speak for myself and I'm sure I can speak for you. We've done a lot of healing, we've done a lot of growing, and we aren't in that place anymore. And that was a struggle for me for a long time, is forgiving myself for this crap I
Mm.
did back in the day, right? And it's interesting. I've worked through a lot of it. I really have, but it pops up every once in a while, like a memory will pop up. I'm like, oh God. And you just so bad want to pick up the phone and call that person, and of course it's somebody that I don't even talk to anymore. It's, they probably don't even remember what happened, but for me, it's just that feeling. And then I have to give myself a lot of grace and remind myself I was in a different place then. And it doesn't
Mm.
excuse my behavior, and it doesn't take away the consequences that can happen for it. But today I would make a different choice. And that's what really matters.
That's true. And as you're talking, Lisa, you reminded me of some of the things I learned about cognitive behavioral therapy, which is a fancy word of being aware of your thoughts.
Yeah,
Why do we fancy words to say be aware of how you think?
I know.
And
I
like
know.
and so for you guys who are listening, like for every time a memory that was painful, I want you to immediately buttress it with, but I learned this is how I use this now.
Yeah.
However, add a conjunction to that. Conjunction,
Yes.
junction, where's your function? I'm sorry, I'm just getting to
It's
Schoolhouse
true.
Rocks.
But it's so true. You're right. Put that but in there. But what are you doing now? That's really empowering too, when you realize that, because that really gives you, you know, a temperature gauge of how much you've grown, of how much you've changed, of how much you've healed.
And I think for a lot of people, they think, well, no, we should continue punishing ourselves.
Oh yeah.
And
Yes, yes.
I honestly, I really want to reframe it. And I want to say, tell me how addicted you are to stress hormones.
Exactly. Explain that, because I know exactly what you're saying, but explain that, because that's a really good point. This is an aha moment, people.
Okay.
This is an
For
aha
a
moment.
lot of us, if we have been habitualized to painful events where we've questioned our identity, our purpose, our value, our worth, our identity, we have become accustomed to stress hormones, cortisol. I mentioned this earlier, norepinephrine, but we're also accustomed to this cycle of victimization because
Hmm.
it's familiar and it's comfortable. One of the things I love to talk about is there's a part in the Bible where there's this lame crippled man in the pool of the near the pool of Bethesda, and he's been sitting there for 20, 30 years, and Jesus comes up to him and he says, not can I heal you? Because you could touch the hem of his garment,
Yep.
and heal. He literally asked them, the first question was like, do you want to get well? Now this
Yeah.
is someone who could literally touch him and poof, he could take away, he could
Right.
any ailment. But he realized the heart of the man that he was dealing with was more attached to his pain than pleasure.
Hmm.
And
Yep.
so for some of you guys who are listening, you're like, well, am I not gaining like ahead in my journey? I'm like, well, how wedded are you to that identity that made you feel limited? Because when you think about it, Lisa, it gave you the perfect excuse to use to become an addict, to get into codependency,
Yes.
to all sorts of stuff.
Hmm. Excuses for everything, excuses for your behavior. Well, I wouldn't have done that if, this didn't happen to me. This is crazy. I literally had a mindset, and I can remember thinking this as an adult after I started my healing, but I can remember being in situations as a young adult, and in the back of my head I would act out, right? And the person would get upset, obviously. And I would think, but you just have to understand, I was abused, so you can't get mad at me. You're not allowed to get mad at me. Like, I literally had that mindset. it would
Mm.
go through my mind. I can think back and remember that going through my mind. I don't know if it was, obviously it wasn't as clear as it is today, but I really had that mindset. Like, you have to be nice to me. You can't get mad at me. You can't yell at me. I was abused. So you have to treat me
Mm.
nice. I literally
Mm.
had that mindset, but go ahead and finish because this is really good.
No, it's, everybody, and I love that you said that, Lisa, because everyone talks about acting out, but
Hmm.
no one talks about acting in. And so, what am I talking about when I say acting in? I'm talking about replaying all the messages that came to you as a result of the abuse. It's not the trauma; it's the lies that
Correct.
we believe about ourselves. That's the problem.
Right.
I was talking to a young woman the other day who was date raped in college, her freshman year of college. And as a result of the rape, she came to the belief, I'm dirty. And because she felt that she was a dirty person, she engaged in promiscuous relationships.
Yeah.
She literally was acting in the idea of
Yes.
self-loathing, self-pity, and she replayed in her mind all the things that were imperfect about her, all
Hmm.
the things that were truly beyond her control. She never questioned what was possible given the resources that she had. She didn't have the ability to mind read. She was personalizing it. She was labeling. She was minimizing her own ability, right? And she was acting in. So every time I talk to people who said, "Oh, I acted out," I drank, I drugged, I lied, I stole,
Yeah.
whatever. I was like, sweetheart, you were acting in for a
Hmm.
long time before you acted out.
True.
And so many people they don't even recognize it because it's on loop all the time.
Right. 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 Correct.
All because of the core idea is I'm a dirty person,
Hmm. Hmm. So you're going to make sure
which was a
you are a
lie.
dirty person, right? So you're going to do all
Yeah.
the things that make you a dirty person. And it's interesting. You're right, because at first you don't see that loop that you're doing. You don't see that cycle that you're doing. And then what can be frustrating, where I got to, is, well, okay, I see the cycle. I see it, but I have no idea how to stop it, right? And I could even predict what the next step is going to be. I can even tell you, okay, and now this is what's going to happen, and then this is going to happen, and it would happen because I knew the cycle. But I had, for the longest time, I just looked and I didn't know how to break it.
This is the part that's going to really anger some people who are listening. This is the part. All right. So I want everyone to unclench their butt cheeks and relax their jaws for a second.
And take a deep breath.
Take a deep breath. So a lot of us who are survivors, right? We have a horrible, I shouldn't say horrible. We are very tenacious in our belief that we can control everything and everyone.
Oh,
We
amen.
have this magical belief that somehow we can wink, nod, jiggle around, say the right things, and we can poof, make things happen. Because when we were around emotionally dysregulated people, we could make things happen to some regard because they were so out of their mind, they didn't know. But
True.
now, right, we're in this doom loop of destruction, and how do we get out of it? I would love for everyone to put their war weapons down and breathe and surrender.
Yep.
I am powerless over my anxiety. I'm powerless. The reason why it's so hard is because we're trying on our own strength. That sounds scary, right? To say I'm powerless. And we just earlier talked, I'm like, wait a minute, we're empowered as survivors, but how do we say that in order to become a survivor, we have to admit that we're power? I mean, how does that work? Well, it's the same things that we talk to people who are in recovery from addiction. The first step is number one is admit that you are powerless.
You have
And
no
choose to
control.
go. I have no control. I have no control over the way people behaved about
Nope.
me. I had no in the past keyword. I had no control about my anxiety and my emotional distress because I didn't have the tools. I'm powerless. That is freeing within itself. And I
Yeah.
need tools. I need support. I need connection with other people. I need to rely on others in the healing community.
Hmm.
Because the reason why people suffer so long is because they're trying to heal on their own strength and their own measure and their
Yeah.
own idea and their own. like image of what it looks like. And
Yeah.
then that doesn't work that way.
Mm-mm.
Insanity is doing the exact same thing and helping for a different result.
Right, right. You mentioned about that, the not being able to control others. And it's funny that you mentioned people are going to get really angry, because one of the times that I got the most angry in my life is when I had that moment of realization that I had no control over anybody else. And I was
Mm.
livid. I remember standing in my living room screaming. I was so angry that I realized I couldn't control everybody, because that's also a survival technique, is controlling everything, because you're creating a safe space for yourself is what you're trying to do. And I screamed and cried. I probably had a tantrum. And then I
Mm.
stopped and I realized how liberating that was. That the only thing
Yeah.
that I have control over is me. My actions, my responses. That's only, and it was liberating, because like, that's probably part of the reason why I was so exhausted. I was trying to control
Mm.
everything in every situation. And again, I'm not criticizing myself. It was because it was a survival technique. It was the way that I felt safe, because then I could predict everything. If I'm controlling it, then I can predict it. So it's safe.
But we never questioned even that.
I know.
Even when we were like, that's the fantasy part. A lot of survivors and abusers have in common is magical thinking. And as you were
Yeah.
talking about that, I was thinking about like that release,
Mm-hmm.
that coming out. I was thinking, how liberating is that?
It
Right?
was.
How freeing was that?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
I'm telling you, it took the weight of a lot of stuff off my shoulders. I don't know how long of a moment this was. It was probably like maybe 5 minutes or whatever, this whole scenario that I went through this. And then afterwards it was, it's still a little bit of a struggle, and I had to catch myself, because it was automatic for me to try to control everything. And I had to break those impulses and those habits. But now it's like, God, I don't have to control that. I don't have to even try. I just got to manage this.
And for this, it could be like, I am managing eating 3 healthy, balanced meals a day. I am managing going to sleep at a regular time.
Mm-hmm.
I'm managing blocking my phone number from people who have abused me,
Mm-hmm.
that don't respect my journey. There was the
Yeah.
book that seven effective traits of highly effective people. I'm
Yeah.
just butchering the name, by Stephen Covey,
Yeah.
right? And everybody talks about, the traits, right? But everyone doesn't really talk about the circle of control and circle of influence, right? And the circle of
Mm.
control is very, very small, and this is just about you waking up, wiping your butt, eating, going to sleep, like the basics. Everything else is in your circle of influence. And
Wow.
so for a lot of survivors, we've inverted it. We
Correct.
try to control everyone and then outsource our wellness to everyone else.
Yes. Yeah, that's a beautiful example, and you're absolutely right. That's the people pleasers, and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. And so I guess if we're talking about an actionable item, is like, everyone needs to be honest about what's your circle of control and what's your circle of influence. Are you outsourcing your wellness to people right now?
Right, right, right. Yeah. Are you handing it over? Exactly. And handing over your power too, that you should be in control of. And that, I'm telling you, people, just think it over. It's very frustrating to realize, and it's probably more than anything fearful, because like I said, it was a coping mechanism. So you feel like you're not, but you feel like you're creating this safe space. And so now that's taken away from you. So you're completely vulnerable to the world. You're not. Now you get to focus on you, and you get to improve that, and you get to heal that, and you don't have to live in that place of fear. I don't have that kind of fear anymore. I have zero desire to try to control anybody else. I understand I have, you know, no way of doing that. And it's been so freeing. It was a process though, getting to that place though. It for sure was a process.
You know, in the beginning of my healing journey, Lisa, I don't know about you, but I was thinking, like, once I figured out, cognitive behavior, like, that's for me worked. But that came after a place of calming my vagus nerves, regular massage. There's lots of somatic healing techniques. When I say somatic, you can't calm your brain until you calm your body.
Yeah,
That's just the order. It
exactly.
doesn't work the other way around. You can't head shrink your way into living better.
Correct.
Yeah, your body has to be calm. But I just wanted to say that before anything else. And so this idea of, okay, I get this, right? Why doesn't everybody, I'm screaming it from the rooftops, but I didn't understand a couple of things. I didn't understand that they needed to trust themselves.
Mm-hmm.
They needed to trust the message of healing,
Mm-hmm.
and they needed to believe that they could do it.
Mm-hmm.
All those
Yeah.
three things need to align, this trifecta.
Mm-hmm.
And so for a lot of people, they may be trusting that healing's happening. It can happen. They believe what we're saying is true, but maybe they're not even believing themselves because they're still trying to rely on their own strength. And the really key moment is saying, I put my weapons of war down and I'm just willing to flow with it.
That's very freeing.
Yeah.
That's very freeing to be able to do that. Yeah. And it sounds like it's easy. It's not, but and sometimes you have to keep putting that back down. Sometimes you go pick it back up. You got to put it back down. Right.
It is. I mean, it's crazy. I went last night. I went to a taco joint to pick up some food for my family, and I'm waiting in line. There's only one cashier, and there's like a line of people. And I think I'm next up, and this young man kind of barrels right in front of me and just does his order. And then in my mind, I think, is this going to ruin my day?
Yeah,
Is
that's a good question.
Where there must be a reason, even if I don't like the reason. Think through if this person's worth robbing my joy. And I literally just kind of quickly went through those questions in my mind. I looked at him, and he kind of avoided eye contact. And I realized, wow, he must be going through so much stuff in his own brain to feel like he had a rush.
Yeah. Yeah. There's something going on. Yes.
Clearly. There's something clearly going on.
There's a story kind of similar. It's kind of funny because I don't have patience when it comes to driving. I understand people make mistakes, but it's the people like that aren't very nice. I'm working on it. It's something that I'm working on. I haven't implemented this fully yet, but I think it's a funny idea that there's a coach I've followed, and he says, oh, when someone like cuts me off and in a hurry, I just think, oh, they must have to go poop. They must have to go poop, And so it kind of lightens up the mood. It depends on my mood. It depends, but sometimes that works, you just kind of make light of it. And it's true. And it's like, you just don't know what someone's going through in that moment. And I've got a video that is really powerful, and it shows that. And it shows that you just never know what people are going through. And it's this guy, and he's going through his morning routine of going to work, and the whole way he's muttering, he's complaining, he's muttering, he's complaining. And it is such a powerful video, I'm telling you. And he finally gets to the coffee shop, and he's standing in line, and somebody cuts in front of him, and he's muttering about that. So he's muttering about that. He goes back and he sits down, finally waiting for his order to come. And he's just looking down at the ground, and he sees these feet walk up, and he looks up, and it's this man who's got sunglasses on. He doesn't say a word to him, and he hands him an eyeglass case. And so the guy takes it, he's sitting down and takes it, he opens it up, and it says, get service. And he's like, he looks up, and the guy's gone. So he puts the glasses on, and as soon as he puts it on, he starts seeing this lettering that's going on above everybody's head. And he's like, what is that? And then it comes into focus, and it's what's going on in their lives right now. And as the guy brings his coffee order to him, the young kid, above his head is, I'm fighting addiction. So this guy gets overwhelmed. He gets overwhelmed by what he's seeing. And as he goes back out, he runs out of the coffee store. And as he goes back home, and everybody he ran into that he complained about, he's starting to see what's going on in their life. And one of the most profound at the very end, one of the first things he did is when he got in his car, when he came out of the house and he went to back up, this kid rode by on his bike, and he had to slam on his brakes. And so he was grumbling about that. Well, when he goes through all this and he goes back home, he pulls into the driveway, and he looks and he sees that kid, and he said, I just want to be loved.
Wow.
He gets out, he says, "Hey
Wow.
kid, you want to throw a ball around?" We never know what's going on in people's lives. We really don't. And I watch that video on a regular basis and it makes me cry every time, so that I remind myself, people are going through stuff and I may be going through stuff, but somebody else could be going through something worse. You just don't know. And I said it before, people act out for a reason. People aren't just jerks. They just don't wake up one day and they're a jerk. Something has happened.
Gosh. That wow. Wow. I'm actually just envisioning those little bubbles just pop
Yes.
up every I
Yeah. One of them was a mother who had 3 kids. And as he ran out, because she did something, I don't remember, but when he ran out, above her head is, "My husband just left me and I have no money."
Wow.
Yeah, I mean, it's powerful. It's really powerful. We have to slow ourselves down sometimes and get out of our own head. And it's not easy when we have a lot of stuff going on in there.
One of the things that I learned when I started learning more about the psychological aspects of trauma was the voices in our head, right?
Yes.
And if you and specifically I'm talking about everybody talks about our ego, but it's not really our ego. Sigmund
Mm-mm.
Freud, they said your id, your super id, and I forgot what the other one was, but it got simplified by Carl Jung, who says your child, your parent, and the adult. And so basically what it is, we have 3 little voices in our mind,
Mm-hmm.
all jockeying for power. There's the little kid that's imaginative and free willing. We've got the parent that says, do this and do that and do this. And it's always historical, rule driven, right?
Yeah.
And then there's the adult that's just factual, matter of fact, processing it. But unfortunately, when we are a survivor of a very painful upbringing, we're trapped in the rule-based parent or the free-willing, destructive kid.
Yeah. True.
And we never ask, and they are always butting heads. And you see it when you get drunk and stupid, and immediately after the hangover, you remind yourself about how foolish it was and how we shouldn't be doing this.
Yes.
And like you're literally hearing the voices of the child saying, "But let's have fun." And then your adult never steps in the middle of it and says, "Hey, look, maybe there's another way, or maybe we can use this information to help us."
Mm-hmm.
We never think about that adult voice. It's been quieted.
Yeah. Yeah. It's true. We also have the voice sometimes of the abuser in our head.
In the form of a twisted child or parent again.
Yes. Or we do it to ourselves.
Oh yeah. Oh, you better stay in line and just keep doing this because nobody else is going to tolerate this except me. Or we in order for us to have fun, we make sure that nobody knows what we're doing.
Yeah.
We got to keep it a secret.
Mm-hmm.
And we never question those voices. I remember I had a situation, Lisa, where I literally wrote out, I wrote in 3 different columns, my parent, my child, my adult. But I really focused on my parent and my child. And you wouldn't believe all the crappy negative messages that kept me limited, sad, angry, and confused because they were battling. We shouldn't talk. We should always scream when we feel upset. Back and forth about and I was just thinking about I was thinking about one scenario when I said, "This is how I behave when I feel afraid." So what's your parent saying? What's your child saying? What's your adult saying? And my both versions, my child as well as my parent, were vicious.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Oh, and it is so true because I tell this story a few times, and this was just not that long ago, within the last year, that I was walking. I don't remember what happened. It wasn't anything big, and I was probably in my head, and I was walking out of the bathroom and I heard her screaming at me. And it was my mom disguised as my voice. It was my voice I heard. That's what kind of got my attention. It was weird. I don't know. And I wasn't thinking about it. It's just, it was so loud in my head that I actually turned around. I was like, whoa, wait a minute. Whoa, what is that? And I had to come in my office and sit down and just kind of really analyze that. And I realized where it came from. So this stuff is still there, but as we walk in our healing journey, we can recognize them and where before we would I would have just gone along with it and wondered why I felt like crap, because I was just getting yelled at in my head, and I
Mm.
wasn't even aware of it. But now I'm being like, wait, hang on, be quiet. Wait, what's going on here? You're not going to yell at me. We can talk about this. You don't need to yell at me. It's just empowering.
As I was listening to you talk, Lisa, I was just thinking about the movie Psycho
Oh yeah, scared
by
me.
Alfred
When you see the
Hitchcock's.
mom at the end, that scared me.
Yeah. So this movie is old as forever, so we don't have to do spoiler alerts. But the
No.
fact of the matter is that Norman Bates had his mother in his head
Yes.
long after this woman's dead,
Yeah.
screaming and ruling him.
Yeah. Controlling him. Yeah.
Mm.
Absolutely. Controlling his moves.
Mm.
It's frightening. Yeah. Yeah. But we do have, on our healing journey, we do have the ability to take back our power because, that's really what happened to us when we were abused as children is our power was taken away from us. There's no boundaries, right? All our boundaries were walked over. Just, it didn't matter. Our voices were shut down. And, that is part of the healing journey is getting your voice back, getting your power back, being heard, all of that. And it's a step. And I talk about it a lot. It's, baby steps, but those baby steps can add up really quick. Really quick. So tell us, Denise, how our listeners could reach out to you if they wanted to get in contact with you.
Yeah, thank you so much for that. I just really want people to understand that I'm giving information. It's a gift. You can take it or you can put it to the side of the door, and keep it moving. But the best place for people to learn about me and receive the information I have to share is on my website, deniseglee.com. So literally, or if you're just feeling lazy, just write Denise G. Lee. Don't just do Denise Lee because it's talked about Amber Lee, who was murdered horrifically. Don't
Oh,
do that.
yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, Denise Amberly. I don't know. I'm not associated with that. So Denise, don't forget the G.
Yeah.
and it's full of. I've got tons of articles about some of the stuff that Lisa and I have been talking about.
Good. Lots of information. More, knowledge is power. There's a lot of truth in that, right? It's so important on your healing journey to have knowledge. So, and then I got one last question. What would you like to leave our listeners with?
I want people to understand that growth is not a linear process. It's a zigzag, spiraling, crazy kind of thing, kind of roller coaster ride. And
Yep.
you will feel nauseous. You will feel scared. You will be amazed and delighted and intrigued. All this wonderful, fun stuff. It's all part of the journey. And even if you feel like you can't take it anymore, don't worry. You got more fuel in the tank.
So true. So true. And you know what? And I'll be honest with you, you are 100% right. And sometimes when I'm in the middle of that, I forget that and I have to remind myself, when things are tough and I'm having a down moment, I'm like, wait, I've done all this work. Why do I feel like this? It's part of the healing journey. It's part of the healing journey.
And I'll just say this as you're talking about it. I think we also need my really last closing thought is be ready to surrender.
Yes.
If you want to heal, it's time to surrender.
You have to surrender. Seriously, you cannot surrender. If you don't surrender, your healing journey is going to be, it's not going to be as full. It's going to take you a lot longer, trust me, because I fought it for a long time. I'll be honest, I did. I fought it for a long time. It was a long journey.
Me too. Not gonna lie about that.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Denise, for coming on and sharing and, bringing so much wisdom. And I'm glad we talked about the behaviors and some of the patterns and just to bring some knowledge to our listeners that you're not in this alone, that we all do this kind of stuff. And it's all part of the trauma. And yet we can heal from that as well.